a large problem with the discussions of hip-hop is we stop at I don't like these lyrics, I don't like these images. And a big problem with some of the gender dynamics that we're having is around what we see being presented as masculine identity, male ways of behavior, male ways of doing things. And of course, the problem with commercial hip-hop, and I'm very clear that I'm talking about commercial hip-hop here, is that we have these very narrow constructions of masculinity, right? And many people model their ideas about black masculinity on these particular narrow constructions of masculinity. The sex tourism bit, I think, of course, African American men, what was astounding to me in the research was, despite all the statistics we have about black men, that there is a class of black men who have greatly benefited from America's status as an imperial nation, that have greatly benefited from capitalism, that have reaped certain rewards. And there was an interesting passage that when I was doing my research from Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, that he talks about Latin America being the brothel of Europe. And the ways in which American businessmen and Europeans were going to the beaches in Brazil and hooking up with the Brazilian girls. And for me, it was astounding that who would have thought that this many years later that we would be talking about African American men participating in this same sort of exploitation. And for me, it was stunning on a number of levels because, one, it represented, there was a certain lack of diasporic consciousness, I think, that's been lost in the late stages of capitalism. That's Fanon predicted. And equally, there's a jackleg masculinity, that's operating in which there's a hyper-masculinity that is being promoted and pushed, and simultaneously a hyper-femininity, a sexualized femininity that's coming through. And they're meeting, of course, in the middle, and of course the hyper-sexualized femininity is a fabrication, is a fantasy of this hyped masculinity. But this, of course, is all a part of American masculinity, and we have to be very clear that we're dealing with a kind of swaggering, conquesting, conquering, new terrain, imperial idea of masculinity in which black men, of course, have inherited. And when you can have books like Harvey Mansfield, government professor of Harvard University, writing essentially in a book called Manliness and arguing for return to this kind of idea of masculinity.